So we open the chest. But in this case, the patient are simply, they are forced to get this position because spine is ankylosed, is calcificated, inflamed, fibrotic, and calcificated in this position. They cannot lift it. They want to talk to you. They would do it like this because they cannot put their hand up. They cannot breathe normally. You cannot put so much air in your lungs if you are in this position. So it's a huge problem. They cannot work, of course, properly. Many things they are not able to achieve. It's a huge, huge burden for these persons. And that's why we have to diagnose early. We have to discover disease before this happens, which happened to this guy in 1957. We have to treat here and to prevent this. And we are able to do this today. And I will show you how. So as I told you, the most important thing in this disease is the inflammation of entheses. We say inflammation of joints, but actually entheses is a part of joint. I will show it later. And these are, we have ligaments here, which are touching two bones. And these ligaments here are inflamed all over the connection between two vertebrae, for example. And this is the place of inflammation, of the attachment of the ligament into the bone. And that's the place where after inflammatory cells destroy the tissue, the fibrotic tissue is formed, and then it calcificates, and it becomes like a bone. So the spine becomes like a stick, like a bamboo stick. Looks like a bamboo on X-ray when you know what a bamboo is. Yeah? That's what the plant does. I mean the leaves, not the stiff part. So, by the way, fungus, not just only that. Okay, so it is very well known today that the most potent drugs that work in this disease are very effective if you use them early. So you can see here, if you treat patients which are ill for less than 10 years, the success of TNF inhibitors, these biologic drugs, is 80%. So we stop the disease 80% if we treat early, particularly in the first few years of disease. If we treat between 10 and 20, then it's only 60%. And if we treat after 20 years of disease duration, which happens, believe me, you will see patients who will come to you very late. Then you are only successful 30%, which is not good enough. 70% of patients you cannot treat with them. So that's why we have to treat early. That's very important. And now the healthcare costs. That's also very important. The health is very expensive for healthcare. So this is a British analysis. They analyzed if they treat patients which are between the beginning and 4 years of disease duration, and annual cost of treatment to put patient into remission or very well controlled disease, minimal disease activity, which is excellent, the cost average was £1,000 per year. And the cost for the patients they treated who were ill more than 6 years. You will see here, the cost was 3.5 times more, and the success was lower. So they had to spend £3,500 to treat these patients annually, average, and the success was lower. So you spend more money, and your success is low, and you start late. That's why I'm telling you how important it is to recognize disease early, before we have loss of function, before we have this calcification of damaged tissues, then we should treat. So are we prevent this? Are we able to prevent this status? Yes, we are. Now, look here. One of the biologic drugs. These are the data of analysis. This is a way to measure the response. Very strict success if you achieve this so-called ASAS-40. I won't explain what it means, but this is the way of measurement. So, if you treat patients which are shorter than 5 years of disease duration, you are very successful in comparison to placebo. See? Extreme difference. But if you treat those who are older in disease duration than 5 years, the success is much lower. Then, if you treat patients who are in the inflammatory phase, so the beginning of the disease, when inflammation is active, you are very successful. If inflammation is already stopped because tissue is already damaged and it's fibrotic and it's calcified, inflammation stops by itself. But it's late, the patient is already clearly damaged and the success of treatment is low. You cannot do anything. So, how we should manage these patients? There are general rules that they should exercise a lot. There should be some rehabilitation therapy, of course, and that we should start with NSAIDs. So what are NSAIDs? What this acronym means? Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Yes. What drugs? Could you give me a name of one of them? How many of them do we have in the world, by the way? Do you know? How many different molecules we have in this group of drugs? By the way, this is the most frequently used group of drugs in the world. Most frequently used. You can buy them without prescription, sometimes even in supermarkets, not just in pharmacies, in many countries. There is some kind of doses that are called over-the-counter, so you don't need prescription for that. 3 to 6 months. And if it doesn't work, along with local glucocorticoids for peripheral part that we can inject into the joints, if that doesn't work, then we go to biologic drugs. These recommendations are for 2011, and then we only have TNF blockers or TNF inhibitors. These are biologic drugs that inhibit tumor necrosis factor, TNF. And this is a very potent way to treat autoimmune diseases. Nowadays, we have some new drugs, and I will show them to you, which are, you can say, even better than TNF inhibitors. But we will see that. And along with that, you can use analgesics sometime and surgery if it's needed. But surgery is very complex for these patients. So, the beginning of treatment are NSAIDs. They are so-called first-line therapy. And that is official recommendation, along with non-pharmacological treatment. Are they successful? Well, they can stop the damage, at least slow the damage in some patients. And that was proven after 2 years of treatment in some patients, but in a small proportion of patients. This is one of the studies to prove that. But as you can see, there was no huge difference between continuous treatment and on demand, meaning where only when the patient is painful. That's one point. And the other point is that we learned from the German registry that this therapy works only if patients are taking very high dose, high NSAID intake over 2 years, only in these patients. And only in patients that have highly elevated CRP, meaning active inflammation and presence of syndesmophytes. Syndesmophytes are already calcified and disease, so already damaged and disease, beginning of it. So it works in small proportion of patients. That's one point. However, some other studies show clearly, and we know that from clinical practice because we see that in majority of patients, these drugs doesn't work well. This Basdai is made of measurement of disease activity, and as you can see here, this was 6 months of treatment or 24 weeks of treatment, and the level of buzz dye didn't change. Either it was on demand, you give tablet to patients only when he feels pain, or it's continuous everyday high dose treatment. It was the same, no change in activity in the majority of patients. This is average, so it doesn't work in many patients. You have to know that. Okay, and then there is a big problem with NSAIDs and its safety. These are recommendations for the treatment of disease, official, and they says, be aware of cardiovascular, gastrointestinal, renal risks. Take it into account when prescribed NSAIDs. And it is true, because we know from many epidemiological studies that patients are dying from GI bleedings because of NSAIDs. This is American statistics for GI bleeding, and it was the end of last century, close to 17,000 patients died because of GI bleeding, because they were taking NSAIDs. And that was the close number to the patients that died of HIV infection, and much more than those who died because of multiple myeloma and some other severe diseases. So this is very important to know. The number of adverse events is huge. NSAIDs could damage GI tract, as we said, cardiovascular, hepatic, renal, and others. And the important thing about GI, which is the most common, is that if patient bleeds, there are no symptoms. In 80% of them. This is very people seeing, a good friend of mine from Stanford University, and he works a lot on NSAIDs. We had some studies together, and Gertie Palton showed in one epidemiological study that 80% of patients who were admitted to the emergency units in US because of GI bleeding connected, acute GI, severe GI bleeding connected with use of NSAIDs, had no symptoms unless there's no pain in the belly, unless their hemoglobin went so low that they feel dizziness, that they were disoriented, and everybody saw that something severe was happening, and they brought them to the emergency unit. That could be a big problem, because they can die because of that. Then also there is cardiovascular system that could be affected, strokes or heart attacks could be higher. So NSAIDs are not safe drugs in some patients, in rheumatoid arthritis. But let's see how it works in spondyloarthritis, in ankylosing spondylitis with the spine. It doesn't work. See the line of activity is the same through the 4 months. 16 weeks is the same. So the activity didn't change. Why? Why? If we call this spondyloarthritis, so arthritis of the spine, so why it doesn't work in arthritis of the spine? Because it's not arthritis, I told you. It's enthesitis. The most important thing in this disease is not inflammation of the joint. I mean synovium. Because in most of these joints there is no synovium. So the joints between the discs, the biggest joint between the two vertebral bodies is the disc. And disc doesn't have synovia. You just have adhesives. And you can have the volume of the disc. And it's not synovia, so it's enthesitis. It's the inflammation of the attachment of ligaments to the bone. And that's why simply in enthesitis, this drug doesn't work. It works in synovial arthritis, but not in enthesitis. That's the problem. That's why you should change the name. We always seem to change the name. But I suspect, because that's the long process. So I will die, and you will change the name, okay? Agreed? Very good, thank you. So, now we have new recommendations for the treatment with biologic drugs, because these previous drugs more or less doesn't work. So, these recommendations are also complicated. You know, we rheumatologists are complicated people. You should be more simple than us, because being complicated is not a good thing. You should be as simple as you can. And I won't read it by heart what has to be fulfilled. In a short words, patient has to be active if you would like to start with biologic drugs. We have the measure of activity. The measure is here. This is some kind of measurement called ASDAS, and there is a number of the level above which the disease is highly active. There is BASDAI. I won't explain what it means. Because if you become rheumatologist, you will know that then. Now you don't need it. But at some level of activity, you have to start biologic drugs. And then if there is some level of improvement, which we also measure, so the drop of the ASDAS or BASDAI, then you are successful. If not, you change the drug. That's the bottom line. So you start with NSAIDs, then you go to one biologic. If NSAIDs doesn't work, and if this first biologic doesn't work, you go to another. We have two groups of biologics now, TNF inhibitors, as I told you. And we have now IL-17 inhibitors, which are very promising new drugs, and I will tell you something about the both. Now, what is the efficacy of biologics? Let me just show you briefly, first on TNF inhibitors, which are the first drug we tried. So, etanercept. This is one of the most famous TNF inhibitors. As you can see here, in this group of patients, it was successful in bringing a partial remission, which is fantastic state, in 50% of patients, in comparison to sulfasalazine, who was able to do that only in 19% of patients. And this was scientific comparison, double-blind. So, as you can see, this was more than 3 times more successful. Then, another TNF inhibitor, infliximab, much better regarding this measurement, ASAS40, and partial remission also, significantly better than placebo. Then, adalimumab, next TNF inhibitor, significantly better than placebo, in early disease, non-radiographic SPA, regarding ASAS40 measurement, also very good measurement. Again, adalimumab, but here you can see where the drug works. Even these, the best drugs that we have today, biologic drugs, doesn't work when the disease is old, when you have advanced disease. So as you can see here, adalimumab works only if there is MRI positivity, so active inflammation seen by MRI, and high CRP, which shows us that there is increased level of inflammation. If CRP is normal and MRI is negative, drug doesn't work. It works like placebo, and it's a very expensive drug. You shouldn't waste money. You should treat early. Okay, TNF inhibitors are very good, much better than previous therapy. So you can call them a Mercedes sport car, because we made it like a car, that's why I don't grow it. But I think the girls like cars as well, more or less. Huh? Not so much as we, but they probably like it. So you can call TNF inhibitors like a Mercedes-Benz sport car. I don't know if you ever drove it. I did it once, and I don't have it because I'm a doctor. Now I'm coming to explain what enthesitis is again. So enthesitis is the inflammation of the entheses, the ligaments that connect two bones, and they keep the bones into place. And when they are inflamed, this attachment of the ligament to the bone is inflamed. That is called enthesitis. And that is exactly what happens here. And one of the most important cytokines that drives this inflammation, that is responsible for the start of autoimmune inflammation of entheses, is IL-17. IL-17 is produced there, and that's why we have this inflammation of entheses. IL-17 is produced, and we know that in previous years we knew that it's not arthritis. We discovered that enthesitis is the most important. And that's why we developed the treatment that would stop the activity of IL-17 instead of TNF. And one drug was developed and registered, secukinumab is the name. There are all these strange names of biologic drugs, you know. One of them I didn't mention today, anakinra, IL-1 inhibitor, because we don't use it in rheumatology except in the children in some rare diseases. And when I heard that name for the first time, I thought it was some peak in the Himalayas. You know, anakinra, which sounds like that. You know, Brahma, I don't know. That was something like that. But the name has some logic, but I won't explain it. This MAV means that it's monoclonal antibody, and so there is some logic in the name. Despite they are a little bit strange. The factory name is Concentrix, which is also complicated. Okay, so secukinumab was tested heavily because it blocks IL-17, and we hoped that it will work very nicely in spondyloarthritis. And what was the result of the number of studies that we've done? We tested mostly inadequate responders to NSAIDs, because they are first-line drugs. But we also tested patients who were previously treated with TNF inhibitors. So to see if TNF inhibitor didn't work, which happens sometimes, not in the majority of patients if you start early, but it happens. So we tested if IL-17 blockade will work when TNF didn't work. So let's see briefly the results. So this is one result where secukinumab, 150 milligrams, was tested in comparison to placebo, because you don't have a conventional drug to test it. Methotrexate doesn't work. Other chemical drugs doesn't work. So you have to compare it with placebo. And the efficacy was fantastic, really great. For 6 months, as you can see here. So 6 months data, excellent. Now, these are 2 types of measurements. Non-responder imputation is this type, this is another type. So I won't bother you with that. This is science. You don't need to know that now. You will learn it later if you are engaged in that. However, this shows you that the result was fantastic in comparison to placebo. Why placebo was used so short? What do you think? See, placebo was used only for 16 weeks, sorry, and the drug was used for 52 weeks. So why? What do you think? We doctors should take care of our patients. We shouldn't use placebo for a long time. So there is something that is called ethical or ethics committee, which approves any study. And if you come to the ethics committee and say, I would like to test this drug in comparison to placebo for 6 months, an ethics committee would say, no, you won't do that. Because it's too long. Your patients will suffer. So you can do it only for a short time. And then after that, when you prove after 6 weeks that placebo doesn't work, you change these patients and give them drug, which is okay.